This chart compares the wealth of nations against a single private enterprise. On the left is the combined GDP of roughly 140 countries. On the right, the peak annual revenues of Apple in 2011, ExxonMobil in 2012, and a company operating today called Cargill. Cargill is larger than all of them, yet you have almost certainly never thought about them once in your life. They have no stock ticker. They never run Super Bowl commercials. You won't find their CEO on a magazine cover or their founder's biography in an airport bookshop. This invisibility is a deliberate choice. They don't sell to you, so they don't need to compete for your attention with phones or search engines. Instead, they own the hidden infrastructure that sits underneath the global food system: the grain markets, the shipping routes, the processing facilities, and the fertilizer networks. These logistical choke points determine the cost and availability of nearly everything we eat. By aggressively avoiding the public eye while amassing control over these fundamental resources, they have engineered a form of global power that avoids the transparency and disclosure required of almost every other major corporation. In 1865, the American Midwest was in a state of violent economic transition. As railroads pushed west through the prairies, millions of acres of fertile land were opening to mass commercial farming for the first time. That same year, a 23-year-old named William Wallace Cargill purchased a primitive wooden grain warehouse next to a rail line in Conover, Iowa. Cargill realized that the real leverage existed in the space between the field and the consumer. By controlling where grain was stored, graded, and priced, he could dictate the terms of trade. The farmer was at the mercy of the market, but the man who controlled the warehouse, who could wait for prices to move or offer cash against future deliveries, became the market. William built this network for decades, but his death in 1909 nearly destroyed it. The company was left with fragmented ownership and crushing debt until a 27-year-old who had married into the family, John McMillan Sr., stabilized the business through extreme financial discipline. McMillan realized a regional storage business was still vulnerable. Looking at this supply chain diagram, a warehouser is still dependent on the shippers and processors around them. McMillan's goal was to eliminate every outside intermediary. Over the following decades, they expanded into international trading and acquired their own fleet of ships. They built processing mills to turn raw grain into animal feed and developed sophisticated financial services to manage the price risks of handling millions of tons of commodities. By systematically owning every adjacent link in the food chain, the family transformed a local warehouse into an inescapable global toll booth. Through 6 generations, the family has maintained one rigid policy: they will never take the company public. In the commodities trade, information is the primary weapon. Legally mandated SEC disclosures and quarterly reports would reveal their profit margins, trading positions, and internal strategies to every competitor. Remaining private grants them a massive informational advantage. They can move through global markets without ever being required to disclose what positions they hold or what strategy they are pursuing. The power of this secrecy became clear in the summer of 1972. A catastrophic wheat harvest failure forced the Soviet Union to quietly enter the American market to purchase billions of dollars in grain. The Soviets worked through private traders like Cargill to execute these purchases in secret. By the time the Nixon administration understood the scale of the trade, the contracts were signed and the grain was committed. The shock hit the domestic market immediately. Grain prices soared, American bread prices spiked, and farmers were left furious that they had sold their harvests before the Soviet demand drove the market up. The Great Grain Robbery demonstrated that when a massive private entity controls both the physical harvest and the flow of information, they operate with a level of geopolitical influence that is insulated from any democratic oversight. Today, that physical network generates over $160 billion in annual revenue. But this sprawling industrial infrastructure serves a dual purpose. It is a real-time data collection engine. Weeks before official government reports are released, Cargill's people on the ground in the Brazilian soy belt of Mato Grosso or inspecting silos in Ukraine are reporting exactly what the actual yields will be. They track proprietary shipping route intelligence, logistical bottlenecks, and early demand signals from sovereign buyers before any public market signal appears. This intelligence creates a more accurate picture of the world's food supply than any information held by the CIA, central banks, or national agricultural ministries. The consequences are felt when food prices spike globally, contributing to the conditions that produce political instability and civil unrest across the Middle East and North Africa. In these moments of crisis, the company takes active positions in the very markets that set these prices, trading on proprietary intelligence that is not publicly visible. We are used to measuring power by public attention, but the ultimate control over human survival belongs to the one entity smart enough to make sure nobody is watching.